Okay, hello everyone. I'm going to talk about content management systems and how we can support the localization of content stored in content management systems. And specifically, this project looked at using this CMIS standard from OASIS, which supports interoperability in content management systems. So, organizations, content management systems are used by a wide range of organizations. They can be used to manage content on websites or basically any other type of content. And it's possible that organizations might have several content management systems. In a large organization, it's possible that separate departments might have separate content management systems. Different offices in different locations might have their own content management systems. And so you could end up with a situation where you have a content management system for your marketing material, another one for your user documentation, and other ones that are locale specific. And sort of maintaining and localizing content across these separate content management systems is becoming more important because enterprises are quite keen to improve the overall content experience of their customers. So content management systems, generally speaking, what they do is facilitate the creation, storage, editing, and publishing of content. And a lot of them do more than this, but these are the basic things that they all should do. And they broadly fall into two categories. So there are web content management systems like Drupal, WordPress, and Joomla, and lots of other ones. And these are really for managing websites and the content that you publish online. And then there are enterprise content management systems which are more to do with managing the content within a business, content that's related to that business's processes. So not just stuff that you publish online. Some examples of that are Alfresco and SharePoint, and there are lots of those as well. So content management systems can vary in lots of different ways, and there are lots of reasons why you might choose one content management system over another one. It might be important to you what platform it runs on, what languages it's written in, because if you're going to deploy it, then you need to be able to support it. And the cost might be a factor. You might prefer to go with an open source solution, or you might prefer a commercial solution which has, customer service and technical support and that kind of thing. But the big difference is, is obviously things like features. So content management systems are all good at different things. There's no one content management system which is the best at everything, but there may well be a content management system which is the best in some particular situation for some particular purpose. And because of this, this can lead to you having multiple content management systems for these multiple purposes. If you're a big organization and you do lots of different things, you might need different content management systems with different strengths so that you can do all of those things. So, a bit about content management and localization. So, with localization, you start with a source document. It undergoes the localization, which might involve translation and editing and review and all that kind of thing. And at the end, you have a localized document. The source of that original source document is likely to be a content management system, and the place where you put the localized document at the end of that process is likely to be a content management system as well. So if we can achieve good integration between content management systems and localization tools, it's reasonable to expect that you should be able to reduce costs. It should be possible, there's a lot of work involved in gathering content and preparing it for localization. If you can automate that, then that should reduce cost. And there's also the fact that increasingly content is sort of written and then revised and revised again, and so there's a need to localize content which is changing all the time, and this requires this asynchronous content status tracking between content management systems and localization tools. So until now, if you wanted to integrate with a content management system, you would use, well, you would always use some kind of an interface, like an API. And until now, a lot of these are proprietary. Each one is different. So if you want to integrate with a new content management system, it's likely that you're going to have to rewrite your tool to be able to support their API. And this can lead to lots of problems. So if you've chosen a content management system that you're happy with, that might limit your choice of tools that you can use to work with, and vice versa. If you have tools that you're already using, that might limit your choice of content management systems, and it can lead to you being stuck with whatever choices you've made already. So there is this standard from OASIS, which is quite new, and this sort of provides a standardized API for integrating with content management systems. And this has the potential to reduce some of those problems. It should improve interoperability. It should improve your ability to integrate with content management. But localization is not in the scope of the CMIS standard. Okay, so what is CMIS? CMIS defines a domain model and bindings that can be used by applications to work with one or more content management system or repositories. It's quite new. It was only published in 2010. It has a lot of, it was produced with a lot of participation from a lot of big companies, and these are just a few from this on this slide, but there are a lot more as well. And despite the fact that it's relatively new, it has become quite popular. It's targeted mainly at the enterprise content management systems. It doesn't really, web content management systems haven't really started to adopt this, but the enterprise systems have shown a lot of support for it, as you see now. So this is a list of ECMs which claim to have server support for CMIS. And there's server support and client support for CMIS. And the server support means that your content management system can, you can connect to it, you can create and edit and update your files or your documents. Whereas the client support is only really in use where the content is located somewhere else and the client just pulls that in and displays it. Okay, so in CMIS there are 4 base types. And whatever you want to do with CMIS, you need to work with these 4 base objects. So they support document objects, folder objects, relationship objects, and policy objects. And document objects and folder objects are quite self-explanatory. They do exactly what you would think they do. The documents are the basic entities that are managed by the repository, and folders are just used to kind of organize these. Relationship objects define a sort of binary relationship between objects, and so you can sort of link source objects with target objects. And then policy objects are sort of administrative policies that you can apply to objects. And these are considered repository specific in the sense that CMIS doesn't say anything about what those policies are or what they might be, but it just gives you the ability to store them. And in the CMIS specification, only document objects and folder objects are required in the implementations. So not all content management systems which implement CMIS support relationship objects or policy objects, and that can lead to some problems, as we'll see. So in terms of supporting interoperability between the content management systems and localization tools, we've identified two main requirements. So internationalisation metadata allows content owners to specify instructions which inform localization processes. And in ITS we have internal and external rules. And our aim is to support external ITS rules through CMIS. And then the other requirement that we looked at was the need for to be able to sort of track localization, to track documents through localization processes, and to be able to tell when a document is ready for a particular process. And the ITS, for the ITS2 standard, there has been a proposal for a requirement to include readiness signaling, which would say when documents are ready for particular processes. And it's our aim to, in this project, to support this sort of asynchronous change notification using this sort of readiness information and do that through CMS. So ITS uses these XPath selectors, and they indicate which elements within documents are subject to specific localization rules. And one of our requirements in this project was to capture these document-level ITS rules, and we looked specifically at the translate rule. According to the ITS specification, you can implement this as a tool-specific mechanism. So in our case, we're implementing these external rules through CMIS. And in our implementation, we allow for rules to be applied to multiple documents, for multiple rules to be applied to individual documents, and we also allow for you to specify the order in which these rules should be applied. So we consider precedence in this implementation to be important. Okay, so what is this readiness thing? So this readiness metadata, it indicates the readiness of a document for submission to localization processes, or else it gives you an estimate of when the document is going to be ready for whatever process you're interested in. And the data model contains things like the type of the process which you're interested in, the time it's going to be ready at, the target which you want to have it completed by, priority, and whether or not this document might have been revised since it was made ready for some process. Okay, so to do this and to be able to sort of monitor this readiness information and to send notifications, we want to be able to notify the fact that some document or documents are ready for some particular process. And to do this, we've defined this sort of polling extension where you look at these properties at some specified interval, which you specify yourself, and it checks for readiness properties which hold particular values that you might be interested in. So if you're looking for things that have high priority and you want them to be notified to you when they become ready, then there's also some information about how the notifications are going to be sent. So you might have a situation where a document is recorded as being ready to be edited, and you might want your tool to be able to notify an editor tool or something like that. Okay, so there are two ways of implementing this sort of extension in CMIS. One way is to take the sort of information that you want to include and to create a new object model on your content management system or in your repository. And that would include things like your readiness information, and then you would make sure that your documents are of that type and that that you're able to store those properties there. The problem with that approach is that you may already have your own custom types in your content management system. Your organization might have particular types of documents, and so it's not really feasible to expect people to sort of ditch their own custom content models which they're using already and start using yours just because yours includes things like your readiness information. The other approach then would be to, well, another way of doing that would be to create a new global base type which all of your other documents extend, so that things like your readiness information would sort of propagate throughout your whole repository and be available on any type of document. But this means that it would end up in places where it's not really used or not necessary, and you know, if you had a lot of content, that could lead to maybe performance issues, or it could also interfere with, you know, if someone else came along with the same idea, then you would have two global types, which you wouldn't really want. So the other approach that we looked at was it was an alfresco specific approach. So in the alfresco enterprise content management system, it allows you to define what they call aspects, which are sort of sets of properties which you define, and then you can attach to documents as and when you need them. And this is the advantage, that you only use them where you need to use them. You're not sort of using them in lots of places where they're not required, and it doesn't interfere with any existing content model that already exists, that you're already using. So we looked at, in terms of implementing this, we did our main implementation in alfresco using this aspects approach, but we also tried it out on this second ECM, which is Nuxio, and we used the sort of custom content modeling approach there, just to see that you could do all of this if you didn't have aspects. So in terms of how this looks when you these objects look when you create them, on the left of this graph you see this is the sort of content modeling approach where you extend the CMIS document to include the properties that you require. So here we've added this readiness information that I was talking about, and created a new document type based on the CMIS document baseline. And on the right hand side you see how this is done with aspects in alfresco, and this is where the properties are included in an aspect, and you just attach that to the document as you require. To implement the translate rules, what we looked at was using the CMIS policy objects, and in that case you would create a policy object type which included the translate rule information, and then you could apply those policies to individual documents or to multiple documents, and you would use then an additional policy object to say which order those translate rules should be applied in. And this seems to us to be quite a logical way of doing it, but the problem is that policy objects aren't required in the CMIS specifications. So, and in our experience, a lot of the ECMs might not support policy objects. So we looked at doing it another way. So in the CMIS specification, there's this notion of multi-filing, where you can include the same document in multiple folders. And so to use this, we tried to use this then to to implement our translate rules. And in this case, we extended the CMIS folder object to include the translate rule information. And then, you know, by adding documents into those folders, into the multiple translate rule folders, that was sort of saying that these translate rules should be applied to these documents. And then the ordering is included as a property of the document. And this might not be the most sort of elegant solution, but it's sort of more likely to be available because policy, like I say, policy objects aren't necessarily implemented in every CMIS implementation. So then there's this notion of the polling schemes. So when you want to set up some scheme for checking documents to see are they ready for some particular process, what we did was we implemented CMIS folders. So we used basically the same approach as the translate rules. We created the polling schemes as folders, which you can add documents to if you want them to be polled according to that scheme. And like I said, these can be multi-filed, so they can exist in multiple folders, so they can be polled by multiple polling processes. So this just shows you what it looks like when you apply all of the different aspects that we're using to a document, and this is with the alfresco approach. And the readiness I talked about before, the bottom left shows the translate rule ordering precedence, and then above that, in order to make sure that once a notification has been sent that some document is ready for some process, you need to record that so that you're not sort of sending notifications for the same thing again and again. And what we found, in fact, was that this led to some performance issues because querying across multiple aspects, you know, had a lot of was quite heavy from a performance perspective. So in practice, we've actually sort of merged some of those aspects together, which in practice doesn't really make much difference. It's just that this approach was slightly more logical in terms of separating out the different types of information. So the applications that we built for this project included a repository browsing tool. So that was just a sort of a text-based tool that we used for navigating the repositories, for setting this readiness information, for applying translate rules, and for just basic read-write and that sort of thing. The polling system then, we created a polling system then which would load up these polling schemes that I was talking about, run them at the specified intervals, check which documents have met the readiness criteria of those polling schemes, and then it used this notification system to notify some client application that some documents are ready for some process. And then we built some test tools to sort of to do some simulations and to measure performance and that kind of thing. So the technical setup was what we did for our evaluation was to use Amazon instances to measure our performance. This is just one way you could set this system up. Because CMIS works over HTTP, you could have these different components hosted on different servers or different clients. The system we used was with the polling system and the notification system hosted on Amazon along with the repository, the alfresco repository. And then on the client side you had your client applications and your notifications. So this just shows what it looks like when the polling system runs. So if you see on the left, the client 1 updates some document and sets some new readiness information for a document to signal that it's ready for some process. That's stored in the repository. And then at some point after that, the poller runs, finds that that document meets the readiness criteria of some polling scheme, and then sends a notification to some other client application. So I won't talk too much about the evaluation, but basically we looked at two things. One thing was how long it took for the notifications to arrive. So if you wanted to check some group of documents to see you know, if they met some criteria, and you want that check to be done every 2 minutes, you would expect that when it runs, everything in the last 2 minutes will be notified. We found that when the interval is very, very low, we're talking about seconds, it can miss some of the documents because it sort of takes some time for these changes to be indexed by the repository, so they don't always show up immediately when we run our queries. But then they should show up the next time you run the poller. And then as the interval increases, that problem diminishes. So for more real-world implementations, that would probably be, it should be fine. Then the other thing, and that's just the numbers from that graph. I'm not going to bore you with them too much. So the other thing that we looked at was the performance. So if you were to implement this for yourself, you might be concerned that you know, this is going to introduce a very heavy burden on the system that you have already. So we ran some tests to see how much of an overhead it is to, first of all, well, to create documents, which is something that you're going to do anyway, to update these readiness properties, and then to poll them to see if they've been updated. And on this, this first part of the graph shows the typical CPU cost of creating documents, and I think in this simulation there was something like 500 documents created. And so that's the sort of cost that you're looking at. The lines you see are the different processes involved. So the top one is Alfresco, and then you have your MySQL process, and then the simulator that's doing all this work. And so you can see that the highest is at the start, and that's where you're creating documents. And that's a cost that you're going to have to bear anyway, because you're going to, you know, that's something that you do anyway. And then in the middle, this shows where the sort of cost involved in checking the documents for updated readiness properties and then sending the notifications that those documents are ready. And you can see that that's quite low relative to the sort of cost of creating the documents. But also, you know, that's acceptable when there are documents being found and being notified. If there were no documents being found, you wouldn't really want there to be much cost involved. So the sort of end of the graph shows what it looks like when the poller is running, checking for files, but when no files are being returned, and that's much lower again. So we think that that's a fairly acceptable overhead. So to conclude, we've used CMIS to support document-level ITS rules. In our case, we did translate rules. In future, we would like to look at more rule types, but initially we did the translate rules. And we've implemented this change notification system, which helps you monitor your documents through your notification, or through your localization processes. This CMIS has the potential to be very useful in streamlining the localization of content which is on content management system. We've done this using the existing CMIS specification, so we haven't changed anything. I mean, we've used the sort of alfresco specific approach, but that's quite well supported by the libraries that are out there. It's you know, it isn't some sort of obscure implementation. But we've also done it with the sort of more traditional strictly CMIS approaches. In some cases we've used folders where we might have preferred to use policy objects. That's a problem with the implementations of CMIS that are out there. If there was better support for things like relationship objects and policy objects, we might have used those instead. So our optimized implementation was done on Alfresco, but we had a lot of this working on Luxio as well, using the pure CMIS approach. So in future we'd like to look at more ITS rule types. It would be nice to integrate this with XLIF to sort of help with the more end-to-end localization process. And we might talk to some vendors about their CMIS support. And maybe, they don't implement policy objects and relationship objects. They might not see the point. So if we can sort of convince them that that this would be useful for us, then they might go ahead and do that. Okay, so that's that. If there's any questions.
Thanks, Aonghus. Any questions?
So thanks a lot for this very interesting presentation. Thanks a lot for bringing up CMIS in the localization industry, because I think this is really a very important thing, not just to use, but also as an example of how tool providers sit together and try to make their tools interoperable in a way. And the funny thing is that a lot of the CMS providers and the CMS integration partners and so on, they seem to not know about CMIS themselves. So, which is sad, because there's still a lot of solutions done without CMIS where CMIS could help. Two questions. You talked about the performance and so on. What were the number of assets or whatever that you used in your Alfresco repository to do these tests? And the second thing is, the question was too long. The second question was if you tried also to make the workflow follow up the localization, so to kind of add attributes to then trigger an additional workflow or action on the CMS side again after localization happens, because that is usually the use case. Somebody triggers translation out of the CMS or marks something as translation ready, and after translation is finished, something needs to be done, reviewed in the CMS or published or whatever.
So the first question was about how many documents we tried this out on in Alfresco. And we did run quite a few simulations, and we've used we used small, medium, and large Amazon instances. We've gone up to, I think the graph there showed just 500 files being created in 2 minutes, but we've gone up to thousands. And basically the shape of that graph stays pretty much the same. And in the more sort of intensive simulations, the thing that broke first was creating the documents. So it never was the sort of this polling system that broke it. Basically, if you were able to create the files, then you would be able to poll them. But we did simulations for thousands and thousands of files. And like I say, that graph stays the same shape. Largely, the numbers might go up a bit. The second question you asked was about triggering. Can you remind me?
Triggering workflows or action on the CMS side after localization is finished, so on the way back.
Yeah. So, we've basically been looking at the part where you pull it out and you say that it's ready for some localization process. In terms of putting it back in, in terms of triggering, so this is something that a client application would do, and the client applications we've done where I say a client application, it could be a client application on the server, but our client applications we're generally just sort of receive the notifications and sort of show that it's receiving them. if you wanted to do more, then instead of just receiving a notification, you would receive it and then do something. But there are CMS specific ways of managing workflow, and I know Alfresco does that. It has kind of custom actions and things like that. But then you're back to sort of CMS specific.